Who should Bruins fans be rooting for to win the Stanley Cup this year? The Oilers, the Panthers, or just nobody?
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Thursday, June 6th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Before we get into today's topic, quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. I've been following this team, writing about this team for about 20 years now for various outlets. Worked for 5 years at The Score, and have been hosting this podcast since 2019. And today we're talking about who Bruins fans should be rooting for in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now, I have heard the argument that you should always root against the team that eliminated your favorite team from the Stanley Cup playoffs because it affirms the fact that even if they had made it, they probably weren't going to win. And let's be honest, if the Bruins had beaten the Florida Panthers in round 2, which looking back, yes, there were some things that went against them, but the Florida Panthers are the better team. Could they have beaten the Rangers? Who knows? Could they beat the Oilers? Probably not, because it's very difficult to contain Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Evan Bouchard, Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and the list goes on. We'll talk about the Oilers here later on. When it comes to rooting for the Panthers, it's very difficult to make an argument for that. I am not a fan of this team. I'll just say that straight up. They've eliminated the Bruins 2 years in a row. Of course, in the playoffs this season, we had the Sam Bennett incident with Brad Marchand that knocked the captain out of 2 games. We had him not suspended, and then he came back and scored a goal in controversial fashion after bumping, cross-checking, pushing, whatever, Charlie Coyle into Jeremy Swayman, and it was not ruled to be goaltender interference. There's other players to dislike on this team as well. Nick Cousins, Ryan Lomberg, just difficult to root for this team. I personally always err on the side of the Western Conference team. I don't want to see an Eastern Conference team win. And with the history that the Bruins have with the Panthers over the past couple of years, I just don't want to see it. I don't have an argument except for the fact that there are some former Bruins ties here on this team. 2 members of the 2011 Stanley Cup champion Boston Bruins are pretty prominent members of the Panthers organization. We have Shawn Thornton, who serves as Chief Revenue Officer, and Thornton, a fan favorite with the Bruins during his tenure. He was on this podcast from his office in South Florida, talking about what he's doing down there, trying to grow the game in Florida, and he's carved out a very nice role for him. You can see his book here behind me on the shelf. If you're watching on YouTube, some great stories about his time with the Bruins, and certainly he was a guy that was beloved in Boston, and for very good reason. He was a scrappy player, dropped the gloves, won a Stanley Cup with the Bruins, and has gone on to have a very nice professional career, executive career with the Florida Panthers, a team that he played for after the Bruins informed him that they would not be re-signing him after the 2013-14 season. He signed there for 1 year, and then in 2017, after announcing that he would be retiring, he played for a couple years there. After he retired, he revealed immediately that he'd be joining the front office in a business-related position. So obviously, they loved having him in Florida, and he was a guy who quite literally fought for his Bruins teammates and endeared himself to the fans for that. There was, of course, the ugly incident with the Pittsburgh Penguins, but he was just sticking up for his teammates there. And Brooks Orpik was forgiving and understanding after that incident. In fact, those two are friends, and they worked out together during the NHL lockout, if you can believe it, back in 2013. So, Shawn Thornton. There's also, of course, Gregory Campbell, who is the assistant general manager down in Florida. Gregory Campbell, of course, a Stanley Cup winner, playing on the same line as Shawn Thornton, the famed Merlot line, along with Danny Paille. Won a Stanley Cup with the Bruins, had that legendary shift in 2013 where he broke his leg, killing a penalty, putting it all on the line for the Boston Bruins. And again, like Thornton, carving out an identity as a true Bruin after taking that slap shot to the leg, broke it, but still stayed out there to help kill the penalty. So if you're going for the nostalgia bit, you may want to root for the Florida Panthers here because they have Shawn Thornton, Gregory Campbell in the head office. For me, that's not quite enough to tip the scales. As much as I admire those guys and as much as I loved watching them in black and gold, I still look at the current version of the Florida Panthers and cannot get over the fact that they injured Brad Marchand, sneaky, dirty team, and they've eliminated the Bruins in the past 2 seasons en route to the Stanley Cup Final. I just can't do it. I'm not rooting for the Florida Panthers. If you don't want to root for a Canadian team, if you want to stick with the Eastern Conference, with America, with Soupy, with Shawn Thornton, by all means do so. But coming up, I'm going to discuss why Bruins fans should be rooting for the Edmonton Oilers. And in fact, that is who I will be rooting for in the Stanley Cup Final. We'll get to that here as the podcast continues. It is NBA Finals time. Boston Celtics, Dallas Mavericks, and Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and a lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets. You can be there to watch the Celtics take on the Mavericks. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Go on the app. You can get a view from your seat so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the Garden. Lowest price guarantee. That's Game Time, last-minute tickets at the lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And while you're on YouTube, check out Locked On Sports Today, which is all the latest news, opinions, analysis from across the Locked On Sports universe, available on YouTube and the Amazon Fire TV channels app. right, so we've discussed a couple reasons why you might want to root for the Florida Panthers, perhaps geography, Eastern Conference, two former Bruins on the head office side of things. But now let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers. And there's a specific reason why I am rooting for this team. And it's not because they're Canadian and I am also a Canadian. I don't subscribe to the notion that you need to cheer for the team that is in your country. It doesn't even make sense. Bring the cup home. They say, well, when you win the Stanley Cup, each player and staff, they take the cup to their respective hometowns. So even if an American city wins the cup, chances are it will spend quite a lot of time in Canada, Sweden, maybe Russia, Finland, Czechia, hopefully one day with David Pastrnak, America. It goes all over the place. So there's no bringing it home. The only difference is if an American team wins the cup, they go to the White House. If a Canadian team wins the cup, which has not happened since 93 or whatever, they come up and bring it to Parliament Hill and meet with Justin Trudeau. All fine and good. Not all Canadians must get behind Canada's team. I would never root for the Toronto Maple Leafs to win the Stanley Cup, for example, or the Montreal Canadiens, the Vancouver Canucks, maybe the Flames. But even then, when they played Tampa in 2004, I was rooting for the Lightning because Vinny Lecavalier, Brad Richards, Martin St. Louis, all great Canadian hockey players. Why am I rooting for the Oilers? Well, it's a Bruins-related reason. And I've talked about this recently on the podcast, the fact that Leon Draisaitl can become an unrestricted free agent in 2025. Do we want Draisaitl to have the notion of unfinished business in Edmonton and therefore choose to re-sign with the Oilers and continue, if not end his career in Alberta? Or do we want him to feel fulfilled in Edmonton, mission accomplished, throw out the banner, and feel as though now he wants to carve out a legacy of his own apart from Connor McDavid and the Oilers? McDavid's going nowhere. Draisaitl likely going nowhere either, but could be very difficult to re-sign both of those guys to massive deals. Draisaitl right now is making a very manageable 8.5 against the cap. How much higher will that go as an unrestricted free agent? If he feels fulfilled, if he feels as though he can move on with a job well done, he earned many accolades as an Oiler, and then explores his options in free agency and decides to play with his good friend, David Pastrnak. How great would that be? I know it's a bit of a pipe dream, perhaps, unlikely to happen, but they have played together recently. Pastrnak talked about how at the NHL All-Star Game, he very much enjoyed teaming up with Leon Draisaitl. These two guys are pals. They've skated together a bunch of times. Draisaitl used to go to Czechia to do some training. He would go there every summer. They spent a lot of time together before they joined the NHL, and they're close friends. He said it was fun to finally play with him, and he definitely enjoyed it. Told Draisaitl he wished he would come to Prague more often so they can train and skate together. How great would it be if Draisaitl comes to Boston? They can train all the time. And Pastrnak was recently on another podcast talking about how much he would love to play with Leon Draisaitl in Boston. So I'm rooting for the Oilers because I want Draisaitl to feel fulfilled in Edmonton. I want him to feel like he's done everything he can to bring hockey glory back to that city so that he can say, it's time for me to move on. I've done everything I can here. I want a change of scenery. I want to play with someone that I have been friends with most of my life and play with David Pastrnak. That's why I'm rooting for the Oilers. Now, a secondary reason is because Connor McDavid is just so freaking good, and it would be criminal for him not to have a Stanley Cup at some point in his career. This is the first time they made the finals. He had that unbelievable goal in the game in which they clinched the Western Conference. The Oilers are loaded with Draisaitl, McDavid, Bouchard is an emerging superstar. Zach Hyman playing amazing. And don't forget, I talked about this yesterday. You look at Jake DeBrusk, the Bruins perhaps letting him walk. You look at Zach Hyman not being re-signed by the Toronto Maple Leafs, and look how he's exploded in Alberta. We don't want to see that happen with Jake. Let that come. Can you imagine a line of Jake DeBrusk, Leon Draisaitl, and David Pastrnak? Insane. Draisaitl, finish your business in Edmonton. Come to Boston. McDavid needs his name on the cup. I don't think it, if they don't win or whatever, doesn't diminish his abilities in my eyes. He is the best player in the world. And it still would be cool to see him win a Stanley Cup. So that's why I am picking the Oilers over the Panthers. Root for whoever you want, but also feel free to ignore the Stanley Cup final because it's painful to watch it when your team is not in there. The Boston Celtics are in the NBA final. Focus on that. Check out Locked On Celtics. They have everything you need, but I'll be checking it out. I'll be rooting for the Oilers, and let me know who you're rooting for in the comments. Hit me up on social media at Locked NHL Bruins or at Ian C. McLaren. Now, what will it take for the Bruins to get back to the final, get back to this position where we're talking about this club in hockey's final round? Well, we'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. After their loss to the Oilers in Game 6 of the Western Conference Finals, former Bruin Tyler Seguin summed it up so well about just how hard it is to win the Stanley Cup. He discussed how just impossible it is to get to that point. He achieved that feat as a rookie. He was able to get to the final a few years ago with Dallas losing to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Got close once again. Couldn't hide his emotions, though, describing the experience as gutting. He said, hockey's hard. You need a lot of things to go right. The Stars had that opportunity. They went through a gauntlet, beat some really good teams, and knew they had something special. Lost to a team they thought they could beat. Sometimes that's playoff hockey. It's that one bounce, one goal, one save. It's why we all love it, and it's why it's the hardest damn trophy in the world to win. When will the Bruins next be in that position? Well, it's very difficult to say. It's been 5 years now since the Bruins were in the Stanley Cup Final. We've actually been pretty blessed. Let's be honest. The Bruins won in 2011. They were in the final in 2013. In the final in 2019. It had been a good chunk of years before 2011 since they had been in the final back in 1990. So that's like 31 years. We have been blessed to see our team in the final. Unfortunately, there was only the one win. You get in the playoffs, anything can happen, right? Looking back at that 2019 run, it required Columbus knocking out the President's Trophy winning Tampa Bay Lightning in shocking fashion, just as the Bruins were knocked out a year ago. You get in, anything can happen. Now, you need to have the right pieces in place. You need to have the right bounces, puck luck, You need to not have your captain concussed and removed from 2 games and not have that guy punished. Yes, I'm still bitter about that whole incident and about the goalie interference non-call. Heck, I'm still bitter about the puck being blown down when Sergei Bobrovsky just had it for no apparent reason. Yeah, I'm not rooting for the Panthers. But the Bruins have some good core players there. Jeremy Swayman has shown that he can carry this team as far as they're able to support him scoring-wise. They have Charlie McAvoy, one of the best defensemen in the NHL. David Pastrnak's one of the best wingers in the NHL. They have some good secondary pieces. They do need that elite center, and that's where we hope that Leon Draisaitl feels fulfilled and perhaps jumps to Boston next summer. There's some options to sign this summer. We've talked about that. We certainly will continue to talk about that in the lead up to free agency, perhaps the draft, if the Bruins are able to get a first-round pick, maybe dangling Linus Ullmark. But for now, that's where we're at. The Bruins, are they close to the Stanley Cup Final? Not really. There's some teams that are ahead of them, you would think. The Eastern Conference is not getting any easier. You have to think the New Jersey Devils will be back in the playoff mix next season. The Buffalo Sabres will be looking to take a step forward, as will be the Ottawa Senators. The only teams you can really write off for next year already, I think, would be like Columbus, Montreal. But if you look at the standings from this season, you see that there's not a ton of wiggle room there in the Eastern Conference. Even the Flyers were up there for a bit. Detroit looking to take a next step. They just were on the outside looking in. Penguins, Capitals will no doubt be looking to make some noise. The Islanders are always a force, seemingly, for whatever reason. It's not going to get any easier for the Bruins, but they have a lot of flexibility this offseason. They have the opportunity to add. So who knows? Maybe next year, this time we'll be talking about the Bruins in the Stanley Cup Final here on Locked On Boston Bruins, because we talk about this team every single day, no matter what. Please do subscribe if you have not already. Let me know who you're rooting for, whether it be the Panthers, the Oilers, nobody. You're going to focus on the NBA Final. Maybe you're just focusing on the Red Sox, or maybe you're just turned off sports mode altogether. Let me know. We'll be back tomorrow to bring you all the latest on the black and gold here on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.